The lake was quiet, the kind of stillness that hums before a storm. Moonlight pressed against the glass walls of my studio while I cleaned the last traces of paint from a canvas that still smelled of turpentine and salt air. A single teacup steamed beside me, catching the reflection of the water outside. Then, 3 deliberate knocks. They weren't the hurried knocks of a neighbor, nor the uncertain ones of a lost stranger. These were measured, rehearsed, confident. Through the frosted window, I saw her silhouette first. Sabrina, the bride who'd married my son just hours ago. Behind her stood a man with a folder, tall, stiff, bureaucratic. The porch lamp carved both of them into sharp relief. I opened the door only halfway. The lake wind slipped through, cold and metallic. "Evening, Mrs. Lake," she said, lips curved in a smile that never reached her eyes. Thomas Hale, the man beside her, adjusted his glasses and lifted a folder. "We just need your signature to finalize the sale," he said, voice clipped. My eyes fell to the document he held beneath the white porch light. The header read, "Transfer of property, Lakefield Villa, $2.8 million. 2 signatures already gleamed in blue ink, Sabrina's and Evan's. I felt the floorboards tighten under my feet. The villa I built with my late husband's hands, reduced to a line item. Sabrina tilted her head, tone dripping with counterfeit sweetness. "You'll love the nursing home, Maggie. They say the sunsets are lovely there." Thomas Hale clicked his pen, waiting. Outside, the lake lapped at the dock, slow and heavy. I set my teacup down with care. The porcelain clicked once against the wood. "Perfect," I said softly. "Let's stop by the police station first. They're very interested in what I sent them about you." For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the air itself seemed to shift. Thomas blinked. "What exactly did you send?" Sabrina's smile faltered, the color draining from her cheeks. I opened my own folder, sealed, time-stamped. "The same papers you forged," I said. "Only mine are real." The lake wind caught her veil, whipping it sideways. She stepped back. He followed. The silence between us stretched like a blade. When I closed the door, I heard their hurried footsteps scatter down the gravel path. The lamp flickered once, then steadied. 2 nights earlier, the same lake had shimmered gold. The reception hall at Lakeview Inn glowed beneath chandeliers that looked like frozen rain. Laughter, violin, the faint clinking of glasses. Everything soft, everything rehearsed. I sat at the far end of the table, near the window where the lake's reflection trembled under the lights. The seat had been reserved, they said. Reserved always means out of frame. Sabrina floated between guests like she already owned the place. Every camera flash seemed to follow her. Her dress sparkled, catching every bit of light that once belonged to me. When the waiter refilled my glass, I only nodded. The champagne looked pale and empty. At the head of the table, Evan rose, glass in hand. He started to thank everyone, polite, nervous, kind. But when Sabrina took his arm, her voice slid in, warm and practiced. "To our new life," she said, lifting her flute high. Then, smiling directly at me, she added, "To our villa by the lake. May it always be filled with laughter." The guests clapped. Some turned toward me as if expecting approval. I only smiled. The kind of smile that stays still, so it doesn't break. She said our, but the lake was still mine. Evan's eyes darted toward me, then away. He adjusted his cufflink, pretending not to hear the emphasis in her tone. He had inherited his father's quietness, but not his courage. The violin music swelled again. A waiter brushed past, setting a plate I hadn't ordered. I let it sit untouched. In my lap, my hand found the silver key. The key to the villa's north door. It had been my husband's gift, engraved with his initials, R.L. I turned it slowly, feeling the ridges against my palm. Under the laughter, under the speeches, something in the air shifted. A phrase repeated in my mind like a quiet metronome. Our villa. Our villa. Outside the window, the lake was black glass. The reflection of the chandeliers rippled each time someone raised a toast. It looked as though the water itself was swallowing light, one flicker at a time. When dessert arrived, Sabrina leaned toward the real estate broker seated beside her. I caught fragments: title, paperwork, after the honeymoon. Her manicured finger traced the rim of her glass, each circle slower than the last. I finished my drink and set the empty flute down, perfectly centered on the linen. A quiet declaration that I was done pretending to toast. The lake stayed still, as if holding its breath for what came next. By the time I returned home, the fog had thickened over Lakefield like a soft gray curtain. The villa lights shimmered across the water, breaking into trembling ribbons of gold. I stepped out of my car and listened to the hush, that strange quiet after too much noise. Only the faint rhythm of the dock ropes creaking and the sound of my own breath. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and paint. The party perfume still clung to my coat, but I ignored it. I set down my purse and walked straight into the studio. The unfinished canvas from that morning waited on the easel, a wash of moonlight and water, both blurred. I dipped my brush again, tracing a single pale line across the lake's reflection. Reflections reveal what the eyes ignore. That's what my husband used to say whenever I painted too literally. He believed water told more truth than faces ever could. The moon rose higher, slipping between clouds, its light cutting across the canvas and landing on the desk beside it. Something white caught my eye, a small envelope half hidden beneath a folded towel. Bank stationery, embossed with the Lakefield Trust seal. My name was typed neatly on top, Margaret A. Lake. But below it, smaller, in new ink, another name, Evan Lake, co-account holder. The brush slipped from my hand, leaving a streak of silver paint across the floor. I picked up the envelope. The edge was still sealed, but not the way I remembered. Someone had opened it, then glued it shut again. The adhesive shimmered under the lamp like a scar. My throat tightened. I read it once, twice. Automatic transfer forms, notarized, joint ownership, effective the previous week. The villa, the funds, all conveniently aligned. I sat down, the chair creaking beneath the weight of that quiet. Every scene from the wedding dinner replayed in my head. The toast, the word hour, the way Evan couldn't meet my eyes. The dots connected faster than I wanted them to. I reached for my sketchbook, flipping past studies of the lake and garden. On the last page, I began to draw again. This time, not the light, but the pattern of deception. Ink lines for dates, crosshatch for signatures, shading where trust had thinned. Outside, fog pressed against the window like a living thing. The reflection of the lake no longer looked soft. It looked split, one half calm, the other dark. I closed the sketchbook, slid the envelope inside, and locked both in the drawer beneath the easel. The key was cold against my palm. The lake always warned me, my voiceover whispered. I just wasn't listening yet. The clock struck midnight. Somewhere beyond the fog, a distant engine hummed, a car pulling away from the estate road. I turned off the lamp, letting the moon do the rest. The room fell into silver. Dawn over Lakefield broke pale and cold. The fog had thinned, but it left its fingerprints across the windows, small half-moons of moisture, like breath that never left. I stood in the kitchen, waiting for the kettle to whistle, the lake light stretching long silver lines across the counter. The morning paper lay folded beside the teacup. I hadn't opened it yet. I was still thinking about the envelope from last night, still feeling the weight of the key in my pocket. The house was too quiet. When the kettle shrieked, it startled me back. I poured the tea, opened the paper, and there it was. Elder fraud schemes on the rise. Bold type. Page 1. Underneath, a story about families taking advantage of joint accounts, forged deeds, legalized theft. It read like a prophecy. Halfway through the article, the phone rang. A crisp, efficient voice came through the line. "Good morning, Mrs. Lake. This is Teresa from Lakefield Trust. I just wanted to confirm your co-signature on the transfer forms." I set the cup down slowly. "My what?" "Your co-signature, ma'am," she repeated. "The documents were processed yesterday. We just need to verify authorization before releasing the new account access to Mr. and Mrs. Lake." Mr. and Mrs. Lake. Her tone made it sound inevitable, official, already done. I glanced at the recorder beside the phone. An old habit from my years managing the estate. I pressed the red button. I don't recall authorizing anything, I said. A pause. Paper rustled on the other end. Oh, it says here you signed on the 10th. That's impossible, I replied. I was at my son's wedding on the 10th. Another pause, the kind that grows teeth. Would you like me to send you a statement, Mrs. Lake? She finally asked. No, I said, my voice steady now. You'll get something better. A statement. I hung up. The recorder light blinked, still red, still alive. Outside, the lake flashed white under the morning sun. I took the newspaper and laid it flat beside the fax machine. The ink shimmered under the light like a bruise. I wrote a note on the margin. Chain of custody. Establish fraud pattern. Then I faxed the recording transcript to my lawyer, Julian Pierce. One page, then another, sliding through with the sound of teeth-biting paper. The kettle clicked off. The whistle quieted. For the first time in days, I smiled. They started with paper, the voiceover murmured. But so did I. The lake light brightened through the window, flooding the kitchen in pale reflection. By late afternoon, the lake had turned the color of pewter. Clouds drifted low, heavy with unsaid things. I stood at the end of the dock, watching the wind stripe the surface in thin, nervous lines. Behind me, the screen door creaked open. Evan's voice carried over the water before I turned. "Mom," he said softly, "can we talk?" He looked older than he had at the wedding, or maybe just tired. His tie was gone, his sleeves rolled, and his shoes were still damp from the path. He stopped a few feet away, eyes searching the waves instead of me. "I didn't mean for things to get complicated," he started. The way people say complicated when they mean wrong. I kept my gaze on the far shore where the pines met the fog. "What kind of complicated?" I asked. He took a deep breath, hands tightening in his pockets. "The business, our startup, it's failing. I borrowed from Sabrina's mother. She wants repayment. Sabrina said selling the villa was the easiest way out." I let the words settle between us like dust. He didn't look up. For a moment, I could almost see him as a boy again, the same look he had when he broke my favorite vase and waited for me to speak first. "I thought you trusted me," he said finally. "I do," I answered. "That's why I won't let you borrow my name." He turned then, confusion and guilt fighting across his face. "I'm not your enemy," he whispered. "No," I said, "but you've been standing very close to one." The wind lifted his hair, carrying the smell of the lake between us, iron, salt, and the faint sweetness of pine. For a heartbeat, neither of us spoke. He sat down on the dock beside me, elbows on his knees. "You think she planned all this?" I looked at the reflection of his face in the rippling water, blurred, uncertain. "I think she counted on your silence," I said. A gull screamed somewhere above the cove. The waves tapped against the wooden posts like a metronome keeping time. I folded my arms, feeling the chill of the evening settle on my skin. "You can fix this," I told him, "but not by hiding behind love. Love isn't protection when it's blind." He nodded, slow, defeated. I didn't know how far it had gone. "You do now," I said. "Principles hurt," the voiceover whispered as the wind shifted, "but they don't drown." It bent the reflection of the dock into two paths, one leading forward, one back. The morning light poured through the porch windows, thin as silk. The fog had lifted, leaving the lake stretched out in perfect stillness. I tended to the orchids on the table, the white ones Evan gave me on Mother's Day. Their petals shone against the glass, flawless, obedient. I lifted a watering can, tilting just enough to darken the soil. A faint click interrupted the rhythm. I paused, waited, heard it again. A pulse, a buzz, then silence. I set the can down, reached beneath the pot, and felt something cold. A small recorder, no larger than my thumb. Red light blinking. So that was the sound of betrayal. Steady, patient, mechanical. I pressed play. Static, then voices. Sabrina first. Smooth, confident. She won't notice. She's too careful to suspect. Evan, softer. She still trusts me. Her laugh followed. That's the plan. The orchids looked almost human under the sunlight, white heads bowing as the words filled the air. I pressed stop. The room returned to silence, except for the soft rustle of petals brushing glass. Even the flowers were listening. I wrote down the time, 10:43 a.m., and the full line of dialogue, each syllable like a knife drawn slow. The handwriting stayed steady. My breathing did not. The recorder went into a layer of tissue paper, then into the old ceramic teapot on the corner shelf. The one that once held sugar, now holding proof. The orchids shimmered, their reflection dancing across the lake-facing window. I stared at them until I couldn't tell whether the trembling belonged to them or to me. Noon light turned the lake to glass. I sat at the desk beside the window, the recorder laid out like evidence. The green ledger was open, pages ruled and waiting. 10:43 a.m. Device under orchid pot. Playback 57 seconds. Names: Sabrina Lake, Evan Lake. 1 underline, 1 truth. The fax machine hummed awake. Julian Pierce's number was already dialed. The paper slid in, pale and smooth, carrying my handwriting to his office, line by line. The phone rang twice before he answered. "Margaret," he said, voice even, low. "You're certain about this?" "Yes," I said, "and I have the recording." "Then we do this properly. Keep the original safe. Make copies. I'll bring Detective Clara Monroe on board." "Do that," I replied, "but they've already moved first." A pause filled the line, thick, understanding. "Every document, every word," he said finally. "Don't lose a single page." "I never do." I hung up and reached for a blank USB drive. The sound of the cap snapping open echoed through the room. I copied the audio, watched the progress bar crawl, then slipped the drive into an old brush box that still smelled faintly of paint and turpentine. The fax beeped, confirmation tone sharp and final. The green light flickered twice, then stilled. Outside, faint piano notes drifted from the neighbor's cottage, slow and deliberate, keeping time with the pulse of the machine. The water caught their rhythm, sending soft ripples across the dock posts. Truth moves quietly. 1 file, 1 line, 1 breath. The lake reflected the light back through the glass. Each ripple turned brighter, clearer, like paper catching fire from the edges inward. I closed the ledger, pressed my palm over the cover, and whispered a promise that no one would hear. Not to forgive yet, but not to forget either. Midnight returned the house to silence. The recorder, the wine glass, the faint smell of orchids, all waiting. I set a new canvas on the easel. The brush trembled, then steadied. I began to paint the lake outside, the night, the ripples, the lights from their car fading up the hill. Every stroke was deliberate, the water dark, the reflection red. The candlelight on the surface thinned into knives. They painted me out of their picture. I would paint my own justice. Each layer deepened the color until the lake no longer looked like water. It looked like evidence. The brush scraped harder against the canvas. The sound matched the rhythm of the waves hitting the dock. I thought about Evan as a child, hands covered in paint, laughing. Then I thought of his silence at dinner, how it had cost more than any word. In the corner of the room, the camera light still blinked faintly. The footage was already uploaded, time-stamped, encrypted, safe. I mixed blue into the red until the reflection turned violet, like twilight caught in glass. The line of the dock came next, a horizon drawn too sharp to mistake for peace. On the table beside me lay the folder marked Pierce and Monroe. Julian's message was clear. They moved early. We'll move cleaner. The lake outside shimmered under the thin moonlight, calm only on the surface. Beneath, something waited. The brush slowed. The last stroke crossed the horizon line, a thin scar of silver separating sky from water, truth from pretense. I leaned back, let the bristles drop. The painting glowed faintly, the reflection of the lamp slicing through its center. Justice was no longer an idea. It had form, color, and signature. The clock struck 1. The lake answered with silence, and the woman they thought they'd outsmarted finished her first masterpiece. The morning after they came to my door, the lake was a mirror again. Pale light slipped through the blinds, turning every speck of dust into silver. I woke before the clock, the quiet too deliberate to ignore. The air smelled of rain and coffee. On the oak table, steam curled from a single cup. The sound of the kettle had always been my alarm, but today it felt like a summons. I sat down slowly, watching the lake breathe against the glass. Every ripple looked like a sentence waiting to be read. The safe stood in the corner, small and gray, half hidden behind the easel. I turned the key once, the metal catching in the lock the way it always did when my hands were cold. Inside, rows of folders lay stacked in perfect symmetry. Years of order, years of trust. I pulled out the ones that mattered most. Lakefield Title, 2017. Hartfield Estate Trust, 2019. Their paper smelled faintly of ink and cedar dust. I spread them across the table, one sheet overlapping the next, like a quiet confession. Outside, the lake's reflection struck the window and bounced across the desk, painting the paper in trembling light. I took a magnifier from the drawer and studied each signature. My husband's was steady, mine precise. But Evan's, E.H., looked wrong. It was perfect. Too perfect. Every loop, every angle identical from page to page. A scan, not a hand. I traced the line with my fingertip, feeling nothing beneath it. No indentation, no weight. A printed echo pretending to be touch. The printer hummed softly behind me, warming to life on its own. I had set it to log every in and out access from the estate computer. The screen glowed blue. The record blinked back. User, S. Lake. Time, 11:58 p.m. The night she arrived with the notary. I printed the log, the machine's rhythm steady as breath. Each sheet slid out like proof pulling itself into daylight. When it stopped, I turned off the power and waited for the silence to settle. They thought age meant silence, I murmured. It only meant time. The words hung in the air like steam. From the drawer, I took a small USB drive, silver, no label, and connected it to the laptop. The screen lit up with folders I hadn't opened in years. Old paintings, invoices, and one file I didn't remember naming. Audio Pre-WED Archive. I clicked. The sound began with static, then a voice. Hers, smooth, precise. Once she signs, the house is ours. Evan's voice followed, lower, uncertain. What if she doesn't? Sabrina laughed. Then we'll help her. The recording ended with a clink of glasses, faint and hollow. For a moment I couldn't move. The light from the window had turned whiter, colder. The papers on the table glowed like small mirrors, reflecting the truth back at me, clear, merciless. I copied the file onto the new drive and sealed it under a layer of wax paper. The printer still smelled of ozone. The scent mingled with coffee and lake mist. At 6:55, I locked the safe again. The sound of the bolt sliding into place felt final, almost ceremonial. I tucked the key into my palm, its weight familiar and grounding. They think I paint for pleasure, I said quietly. I paint for proof. The painting. Reflections numbered 7 leaned against the wall nearby, its frame slightly open at the back. I slipped the USB into the hollow behind the canvas and pressed the frame shut. The tiny indicator light blinked once, green, alive, then went dark. Morning light swept across the room, catching the faint texture of dried paint. The surface shimmered, as if the lake itself had risen to the glass. Outside, the wind brushed the water into gentle waves. The lake light turned sharper by 9. I was sorting files when the phone rang. 3 precise rings, then silence between each one, like measured footsteps on marble. I pressed record, the red light blinking to life. "This is Margaret Lake," I said. A woman's voice answered, crisp and deliberate. "Mrs. Lake, this is Detective Clara Monroe, Savannah Division of Financial Crimes. You submitted evidence regarding a joint account and property transfer?" Her tone carried the same weight as a signed order, steady, factual, unshakable. "Yes," I replied. "I faxed the documents and the transcript this morning." The faint hum of her office filtered through the line, computers, paper shuffling, the echo of procedure. "Good," she said. "Before we proceed, I need to confirm. Do you have proof of intent?" I glanced at the open binder before me, the reflection of the lake trembling across the silver ring of my pen. "Not yet," I said, "but I have their script." A pause. Then, "Explain." I recorded them. 2 voices, Sabrina and my son Evan. They discussed the sale before the contract existed. It was planned. Her silence meant she was writing. I could almost hear the pen drag over the form. "Do you have the original device?" "Yes. The recording is unedited, time-stamped." "Excellent," she said. "I'll need both the original and a verified copy. You'll receive a secure upload link within the hour." I took my blue pen and opened the notebook beside me. Across the top of the page, I wrote, "Case Lake number 27, initial contact." Beneath it, the ink formed 3 slow words: proof, possession, intent. Sunlight struck the teacup beside me, scattering fractured light over the table. The reflection looked like the lake itself, restless, waiting. Clara's voice lowered. "Mrs. Lake, I should tell you something. Your daughter-in-law's name, Sabrina Hale, appeared in a 2018 investigation in Charleston, forgery and manipulation of estate documents. The case was never closed." I let that settle, the way sediment falls through water. "And now she's moved her scheme north," I said. "It appears so," Clara answered. "If what you have holds, this could reopen the file." I turned the pen in my fingers. "Then we'll finish what someone else started." There was the faint sound of keys clicking, then her voice again, firmer now. "I'll need you to scan and sign the following forms: chain of custody, statement of retention, and the declaration of authenticity. Make sure each page carries your initials, no digital edits." "I understand," I said. "Good. I'll call again once they're logged." Before she hung up, her tone softened just once. "Mrs. Lake, this might touch your son. Be prepared for that." The words lingered longer than the line itself. The phone clicked quiet. I sat still, pen in hand, the page waiting. Outside, the lake shimmered against the window pane, 1,000 small mirrors breaking light into lines. I wrote carefully beneath the case number, "Justice starts with listening carefully." The ink spread slightly, feathering at the edges. Beneath it, one more line, "Silence can be evidence too." I let the pen rest. The reflection of the lake moved across the paper as if reading my words. Clara Monroe, a stranger's voice that sounded like law in motion. The teacup had gone cold. I lifted it anyway, tasted metal and resolve. The surface of the water outside caught the morning sun and threw it back into the room, painting everything in pale gold. For the first time in days, the light didn't feel like intrusion. The Harborview Bank building rose like glass carved from the lake itself. Its mirrored surface caught the thin morning light, bending the clouds into silver streaks. I could see my reflection walking toward the doors. Calm, small, but steady. The sound of my heels on marble echoed through the lobby, each step deliberate. The air smelled of metal and sanitizer. A faint hum from the vents filled the silence where voices should have been. I went straight to the counter. The young clerk, Dawson, his badge read, looked up, his polite smile faltering the moment our eyes met. "Good morning," he said. "How may I help you, Mrs. Lake?" "I'm here to confirm a transaction linked to my property," I replied. "Hartfield Lake Villa. I'd like the log of all activity under that account." He hesitated. The glow from his monitor reflected across his glasses, masking his eyes. "That requires dual authorization, Mrs. Lake." I set my identification card on the counter, the laminate catching the same cold light. "Then get the second key." For a moment he didn't move. Then he stood, straightened his tie, and disappeared through the frosted door behind the desk. I heard muffled voices, the shuffle of paper, a printer warming up. The lobby clock ticked too loudly. When he returned, his expression had changed, something between worry and apology. "If you'll just sign here, ma'am," he said quietly, sliding a clipboard forward. I read the form carefully before pressing my pen to paper. The signature line felt heavier than usual, as though the ink itself understood consequence. The machine started printing. Its rhythm grew faster, the sound like teeth grinding through paper. The sheets emerged one by one, pale and trembling. I watched each line form. Transfer, account B1427, joint authorization, SHEH. There it was, Sabrina's initials beside my son's, the evidence breathing on fresh paper. I took out my phone, centered the camera, and pressed the shutter. The click echoed softly through the hall. Another picture, another layer of truth. Dawson's voice broke the silence. "The joint account was created the day before the wedding, ma'am. It's unusual timing." "Unusual," I repeated, folding the log carefully. "And under whose name?" He swallowed. "Mrs. Sabrina Hale Lake is listed as primary, Mr. Evan Lake as cosigner." I let that settle. The walls of the bank seemed to hum, full of trapped light. "Then you might want to correct your records," I said. "You signed the wrong woman's name, dear." He blinked, uncertain if he'd heard defiance or grief, maybe both. I took one final photograph of the document. Then, opening my email, I attached the images to a message labeled Subject, Chain of Custody, B1427. Recipient, Julian Pierce. My thumb hovered before pressing send. The message whooshed away, and the phone vibrated once, a quiet acknowledgement that proof now had a pulse of its own. Outside, the automatic doors parted with a whisper. Cold air slid in from the street, carrying the faint scent of water and exhaust. I stepped into it, the folder tucked beneath my arm. The wind off the lake brushed my coat, sharp as glass. Behind me, the building's mirrored facade threw back the sky, the clouds breaking apart across its surface. It looked almost like the lake, beautiful, deceptive, reflective. I paused on the steps, watching my reflection blur as the breeze shifted. In the glass, I looked like a woman half inside the system, half outside it, exactly where I needed to be. "Trust isn't paperwork," I whispered, "but paperwork reveals trust." The words tasted like metal, honest and cold. A car passed by, its tires slicing through a shallow puddle. The sound reminded me of the printer's feed, the rhythm of evidence coming to life. I checked my phone. Julian's reply was already there. Received. Secure file logged. Keep original sealed. The corners of my mouth lifted slightly. The law had heard me. "Evidence travels faster than lies," I murmured. The wind caught the words and carried them out toward the lake. The sun broke through for a moment, flashing across the glass doors and into my eyes. I didn't flinch. The reflection held steady, a reminder that truth, once printed, doesn't fade. It multiplies. I turned toward the lake road, my footsteps crisp on the stone. The folder pressed against my side felt heavier now, but not like a burden. It felt like control returning. Julian Pierce's office smelled faintly of paper and metal polish, the kind of scent that came from years of law practiced quietly but relentlessly. Shelves of case files lined the walls, labeled in careful handwriting. A single brass lamp threw a soft golden circle across the desk, cutting through the gray afternoon outside. I laid the folder from Harborview Bank in front of him. The edges were still warm from the printer. He flipped through the pages in silence, every turn deliberate. The reflection of the lamp glimmered across his glasses. "Account B1427, he murmured. "Created one day before the wedding. Primary signature, Sabrina Hale Lake." He tapped the margin with his pen. "This is clean, too clean." I watched his hand move across the paper, calm and methodical. "Can it hold in court?" He nodded slightly. It will hold attention, but not conviction. Yet. He pulled a legal pad closer, drew a quick diagram, arrows, boxes, initials. At the top he wrote, "Fraud flow," then underlined it twice. "They used emotional leverage to justify forged intent," he said, his tone steady. "You were positioned as a silent participant, the perfect liability. We can't fight emotion. We'll fight with ink." His pen made a quiet rhythm against the pad. Tap, draw, tap again. I leaned forward. "What do we build?" "A mock trust revision," he said. "Something official enough to tempt her into confirming the fraud herself. You'll deliver it as if it's the correction to the original paperwork. She signs, willingly, with date and witness. That's the line that traps her." The printer behind him started humming. Paper fed through, white against the dark wood. He took the first sheet, set it in front of me. The header read, "Lakefield Estate Trust, Revised Agreement, Draft Copy." The wording looked flawless, every clause echoing the language of the earlier documents. But this one carried a quiet secret. Its signature box was unique to her. "Once she signs," Julian said, "we'll have proof of intent, forgery, and misuse of authority, all in one gesture. It has to be her decision." "And Evan?" I asked. He looked up, eyes tired but firm. "He'll follow her lead. That's what makes it admissible." I touched the corner of the page. The ink shimmered faintly under the lamp, a soft reflection, like lake water under dawn. "You're sure it's legal?" "Absolutely," he said. "It's procedure disguised as mercy." He reached for his pen again, signed his initials at the bottom. J.P., Witness of Draft Preparation. The sound of the nib scratching over paper was sharp and final. I felt the tension in my chest ease into something colder. Focus. How do I record it? He slid a small black camera across the desk. It was shaped like a picture frame, its lens hidden behind polished glass. "Mount this in your studio," he said, "facing the table where she'll sign. The reflection from the lake will provide natural light. You won't need more than that." I took the device, turned it once in my hand. The glass caught the lamp's glow, throwing a thin ribbon of gold across the desk. "She won't notice?" "She'll see herself," Julian said. "That's the trick. Reflection hides everything." He gathered the documents into a neat stack and pushed them toward me. "You understand, Margaret. This is a slow game. Every step recorded, every line deliberate." "I understand," I said. "Patience is proof's twin." The lamp flickered once, the bulb catching its own reflection in the glass frame. The moment held between us, like the pause between signature and seal. Julian closed his folder, straightened the edges. "Law, when silent," he said, "is the loudest room." I left the office carrying the papers close to my chest. Outside, the city wind moved along the glass windows, whispering against them like the edge of a page being turned. In my car, I opened the folder one more time. The ink shimmered under the fading light, waiting for the next name to press against it. Rain swept softly across the lake that afternoon, breaking the surface into thin silver rings. The air smelled of wet pine and jasmine. I set the teapot down on the low table near the window, the steam rising in thin threads that caught the gray light. Across the glass, the water shimmered, a muted mirror of the sky. At exactly 3:15, the gate clicked. I watched Mrs. Alden walk up the stone path, umbrella angled against the drizzle. She was new to the neighborhood, quiet, friendly, always carrying her shopping bag in one hand and a kind word in the other. I opened the door before she knocked. "Afternoon, Mrs. Lake," she said, smiling. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," I replied. "You're right on time. Come in before the rain follows you." She laughed softly, closing her umbrella, and the scent of rain and roses entered with her. I guided her to the window table, poured the tea. The porcelain cups clicked lightly as we sat. "I can't get over that view," she said, gazing out toward the lake. "It looks different every hour." "It tells the weather before the forecast does," I said. "The lake's a better witness than most people." We talked about small things first, the wind, the fog, the color of the orchids on the sill. Then her tone shifted, just slightly. She stirred her tea and said, almost absently, "That young lady, your daughter-in-law, she stopped by last week. Lovely manners, but curious sort." I felt the air still. "Curious how?" "Oh, nothing strange," she said, waving a hand. "Just asked which insurance I use for property inheritance. Said she was looking into options for an older relative. I told her to speak to her own broker, of course." My hand froze halfway to the teacup. The surface of the liquid quivered, catching the faint reflection of her face, and mine, behind it. "Did she now?" I asked quietly. Mrs. Alden nodded, unaware of the tremor in my voice. "She mentioned your place, actually. Said you'd built quite a legacy here. I told her you seemed perfectly capable of managing it yourself." I smiled, but my breath came slow. "That was kind of you." "She seemed so eager to learn about policies," Mrs. Alden continued. "Said something about changing beneficiaries after marriage. I thought it was just newlywed curiosity." I reached into my cardigan pocket, pulled out my phone, and set it beside the sugar bowl. One silent tap, and the recorder began. The red dot blinked, small but certain. The rain thickened against the window, soft but constant. Every drop muffled the room. Every word felt heavier. "I suppose she's just making plans for the future," Mrs. Alden added, sipping her tea. "Perhaps," I said. "Though futures are funny things. They change when people start drawing lines through names." She chuckled politely, not catching the weight beneath the words. Outside, the wind brushed the lake into ripples. I glanced down and saw the tea's surface mirror that motion, the distorted outline of Sabrina's face in my mind bending with each vibration. The recorder blinked again. I slid my notebook closer, flipping to the page marked Case Lake Number 27. In careful handwriting, I wrote, "S. Insurance query, 3:45 p.m. The pen paused. The rain tapped harder. Mrs. Alden leaned forward. "Funny thing, she invited me for coffee sometime. Said she wanted to understand how one might take a name off a policy after a transfer. I didn't think much of it until now." My pulse steadied into clarity. "No, you were right not to think much," I said evenly. "Sometimes gossip is just evidence that talks." She smiled, taking it as a joke. "Well, then I suppose I'm your informant." "Even kindness leaves a paper trail," I murmured. We sat in quiet for a while, the rhythm of rain filling the pauses. The lake beyond the window blurred into gray glass. In the reflection, the two of us looked smaller than we were, figures framed by a storm we didn't cause, but would soon have to weather. When she rose to leave, I thanked her, my voice calm again. She tucked her scarf neatly, promised to return another day. I watched her umbrella drift down the path, the raindrops making halos in every puddle. The door closed with a soft click. I turned the recorder off. The red light died, but the sound of truth still lingered in the room. I looked down into my teacup once more. The reflection inside was broken now, two shapes instead of one, both fading under the ripples. "The rain covered her words," I whispered, but the recorder didn't. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and staged compassion. Everything gleamed too brightly, the walls, the floors, even the silence. I carried a bouquet of white lilies, their petals trembling under the draft from the corridor vents. The receptionist waved me through after glancing at the visitor's log. Sabrina's name sat neatly on the board, handwritten in blue ink. Cardiac observation, room 312. At 11 sharp, I walked past rows of identical doors, each humming with the faint rhythm of machinery. The air pulsed with the sound of monitors, steady, mechanical, alive only by design. Inside the room, the curtains were drawn halfway, letting a thin strip of light fall across the bed. Sabrina lay tilted against the pillows, pale but perfect. Her makeup so precise it caught the reflection of the monitor's green line. Evan sat at her side, clutching her hand, eyes wide and raw with fear. The machine beside the bed beeped in slow intervals. Too slow, too steady. "Mom," he whispered when he saw me. "She had another episode. The doctor said it's stress from the wedding." I placed the flowers on the table near the foot of the bed. their scent mixed uneasily with the sterile air. Sabrina's eyelids fluttered, just enough to show effort. "I told you," she murmured weakly. "I shouldn't have worried about the house. The paperwork, it's too much." Her voice cracked on cue. Evan turned to the clipboard in his lap, flipping through pages stamped with the hospital's seal. "Dr. Rowan said you need to rest," he said softly, his hand trembling. The top page bore a heading that caught my eye. Hartfield Property Transfer. Emergency Health Clause. My pulse slowed. Property transfer in a hospital room under fluorescent light. I moved closer, the beeping rhythm steady behind me. "What's that?" I asked, tone mild. "It's temporary," Evan said. "Just until she recovers. She wants me to sign so she won't worry about legal issues." Sabrina's breath came ragged. Her lips parted in a fragile smile. "It's precautionary, Maggie. You know how fragile I am." I said nothing. My gaze fell to the IV line dangling loosely from her arm. The saline bag was sealed, untouched. Not a single drop had moved. At 11:20, she gave a small tremor, a theatrical spasm that made the monitor jump. Evan gasped. "Her heart rate's dropping!" he shouted. A nurse appeared almost instantly, adjusting wires with mechanical precision. She wore no name tag. Her movements were too rehearsed, too smooth. "Dr. Rowan approved this?" I asked quietly. She avoided my eyes. "Yes, ma'am, he's aware." Evan hesitated only a moment longer before signing the document. His pen scratched the paper once, twice, sealing his name beside hers. The sound of ink hitting paper felt louder than the machine. At 11:25, the nurse collected the folder, her gloved hands careful but hurried. I saw the header again, the seal at the bottom, blurred but readable. I took a single step back, raised my phone, and clicked. The shutter sound was faint under the heartbeat rhythm, but it captured everything. The forged signature, the fake clause, the counterfeit compassion. When I looked up, the nurse was gone. The monitor beeped normally again, calm as before. Sabrina exhaled dramatically, her voice a whisper. "He signed, Maggie. You can relax now." I met her gaze. "You'll live longer than your conscience." Her smile twitched, breaking for the first time. At 11:35, I stepped into the corridor, pulling the door shut behind me. The lily's scent followed me out, cloying and sweet, like guilt pretending to be purity. I leaned against the wall, opened my phone, and sent the image to Julian Pierce. Subject: Hospital Fraud. Rowan Signature Verification. The attachment bar turned green. Sent. Outside, rain light spilled through the windows, painting the hallway in dull silver. Nurses moved like ghosts through it, their white uniforms blending into the walls. I watched one pass and realized the difference between care and performance was only a heartbeat long. A soft voice startled me. "Ma'am?" I turned. The real nurse, the one on duty, stood at the corner. Her badge read, Harper Dawson, RN. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Dr. Rowan isn't on duty today." The words sank like lead. I nodded once. I figured. She gave me a puzzled look as I walked away. I didn't explain. Some truths didn't need witnesses. They just needed records. At 11:45, the elevator doors closed behind me. The monitor beeps faded into memory, replaced by the hush of machinery and the faint hum of justice taking shape. In the reflection of the elevator's steel wall, I saw myself holding the phone like a confession. "When guilt performs," I whispered, "truth watches." The wind off the lake came in restless bursts that night, lifting the fog in thin sheets across the lawn. The villa stood half in moonlight, half in shadow. Every window glimmered faintly, like a row of watching eyes. I turned off every light except one in the hallway, a single lamp to keep the house breathing but quiet. At 10:10 p.m., headlights appeared beyond the gate, cutting through the mist. Clara Monroe's car stopped without a sound. The engine faded, replaced by the hush of waves brushing against the dock. I stepped outside through the side door, the hinges sighing under the cold air. Clara opened the trunk and lifted a small black case. "Audio surveillance short range," she said softly. "It'll feed to a secure drive through a silent transmitter. No wireless trace." She handed me a set of gloves. I slipped them on, feeling the texture of leather over skin. "Where's the best line of sound?" she asked. "Dining room," I whispered. "She calls there, always by the window." We walked along the narrow path that curved around the veranda. The gravel crunched softly under our shoes, each step measured between gusts of wind. Through the glass, the lake shimmered, silver on black, the kind of stillness that listens. Inside, the air smelled of paint, jasmine, and something faintly metallic, the scent of preparation. I led her through the back hall, past the studio where the new canvas waited untouched. The floors creaked once, then stilled. At the edge of the dining room stood the white orchid pot, Sabrina's gift, ironically. I touched one leaf. It felt too clean, almost plastic in its perfection. Clara crouched beside it, opening the case. A flash of her pen light caught the chrome edge of the table, reflecting moonlight across the floor. "Here," she whispered. She placed the micro mic beneath the soil, right where the ceramic curved inward. The small indicator light blinked once, green, then disappeared beneath the shadow of a petal. We both froze as a gust rattled the windows. Somewhere outside, a branch scraped against the siding, sharp and quick. I counted my breaths until the sound passed. "Power's stable," Clara murmured. "Recording begins in 60 seconds. I nodded. The faint hum of the lake filled the silence between us. It sounded like breathing slowed down to thought. She packed the empty case and straightened. "Once it runs, don't touch it. The recorder's motion triggered. It'll log every word within 5 meters. Even whispers?" "Especially whispers," she said, her smile almost invisible. I followed her back through the corridor, past the studio light flickering faintly against the glass. The moon's reflection traced the hallway floor in thin stripes. When we reached the side door, she paused. "Be careful," she said. "If she finds it, it's your word against hers until we have full audio. Silence buys time. Time builds traps." I watched her car roll down the driveway until its taillights vanished into the fog. The villa fell quiet again. So quiet I could hear the faint tick of the hallway clock and the lake breathing beyond the window. At 10:25, the device began to record. I could almost feel the vibration through the floorboards, a mechanical pulse syncing with the rhythm of the water outside. I sat in the dark by the window, waiting. The moon broke through a low cloud, painting the lake in pale silver. Every ripple looked like a line of handwriting stretching across the surface. At 10:45, footsteps echoed from the porch. A door opened on the far side of the house. Sabrina's lighter steps, quick and certain. The sound of her heels on the marble floor carried straight to the dining room. I stayed in the shadows, unseen. A chair scraped. Her voice floated out, clear, low, practiced. Yes, the papers will be ready by Friday. Once Evan signs, it's done." A pause. "He won't question it. He never does." The wind pressed against the window pane, turning her words into ghosts of sound, but the mic would catch them all. The conversation ended with the click of her phone closing. Then silence again, except for the faint tremor of the recorder hidden beneath the orchid's white petals. I stood there, watching the reflection of the moon ripple across the lake's surface, feeling the stillness tighten into certainty. The city cafe overlooked the waterfront, its terrace lined with pale umbrellas that fluttered lightly in the wind. The noon light was sharp, the kind that left no room for shade or pretense. I arrived early, choosing a table near the railing where the lake's reflection shimmered between the metal bars. The air smelled faintly of lemon and salt from the water below. At exactly 12, Sabrina appeared. She wore a white dress, pressed and spotless, the kind of white that pretends to be innocence. Her sunglasses hid everything but the practiced curve of her smile. "You look lovely," she said as she sat down. "I thought it would be nice to talk, just us." I poured water into her glass, the reflection of the lake glinting through it. "Talking is always nice," I said. The waiter brought bread, olive oil, and 2 menus. She ignored hers, leaning closer across the table. "I've been under so much stress," she sighed. Evan and I only wanted stability. We thought maybe things had gotten misunderstood. Misunderstood, I repeated, my tone even. Stability shouldn't need forgery. Her hand froze on the table. For a heartbeat, she looked like someone searching for her next line. Then the smile returned, bright and brittle. I don't know what you mean, she said. You've always been so private, Maggie. Sometimes people just make assumptions. The clink of cutlery filled the pause. Behind her, a sailboat drifted lazily across the lake, its reflection flickering against the cafe's glass wall. I let the silence stretch. I want us to move forward, she continued. Evan worries constantly. He hates tension. You know how sensitive he is. I know, I said. That's what worries me. Her eyes flicked up, a spark of irritation breaking through the politeness. You think I'm the problem. I didn't answer. I only tilted my glass slightly, watching the water's surface inside it bend her face into two, one smiling, one warped. The waiter arrived with salads, his voice polite but distant. Will there be anything else, ladies? Just patience, I said. He smiled, unsure, and walked away. Sabrina picked at her food, fork clinking lightly against the plate. You've always been so composed, she said, her tone almost admiring. I could never stay that calm. Even this morning, when the bank called about those transfers, I almost lost it. I looked up slowly. What transfers? Oh, she said too quickly. Just the paperwork from the trust revisions. Julian's form, right? The one with the codes? Her words tangled on the air. I felt the world tighten around the sound. What code? She waved her fork dismissively. I mean, whatever you called it. The form B27, I think. He said it should clear by Friday. The sound of the lake wind passed between us, faint but cold. I didn't move, didn't blink. She had just named a file that existed only inside Julian's private correspondence, never printed, never spoken aloud. My fingers rested lightly on the table. Form B27, I repeated. That's a curious number to know. Sabrina smiled, but her throat moved as she swallowed. Just something I overheard. You know how messy paperwork gets. Of course, I said, smiling back. Some doors are better left unopened. She laughed. Too high, too thin. You always talk in riddles. Maybe, I said softly, but riddles have answers. The waiter returned with the check. Sabrina reached for it, her hands steady again, playing her role to perfection. Lunch is on me, she said. Consider it peace. Peace usually requires truth, I replied. She pretended not to hear, signing the slip with her perfect handwriting. When she looked up, her reflection wavered again on the surface of her water glass, distorted, blurred, faceless. At 12:25, she gathered her bag and stood. I'll see you Friday, Maggie, she said lightly. Everything will finally be settled. I nodded once, letting the silence answer. When she walked away, her white dress caught the sun and for a moment disappeared into it. I finished my water, set the glass down, and typed a single message to Julian. She knows. The reply came seconds later. Then she's already inside the wire. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of the lake across the terrace. I watched the ripples turn to mirrored light and thought of her reflection breaking apart in the glass. The afternoon light came thin and white through the villa windows, reflecting off the lake and scattering across the glass cabinets. The air inside felt heavy, too quiet, too arranged. The papers were already on the table, aligned perfectly. Julian's envelope sat unopened beside the lamp, its seal marked Revised Trust Form. At 4:40 p.m., I set 3 cups of tea on the sideboard and placed the form in the center of the table. The gold pen gleamed against the white page. Evan and Sabrina sat opposite each other, their silence loud enough to hear the tick of the wall clock between breaths. Evan adjusted his collar. His eyes looked tired, but obedient. It's just a revision, right? He asked, glancing at Sabrina. She smiled without warmth. Yes, dear. A formality. You know how legal things are. The word formality rolled too easily off her tongue. I slid the papers toward them. My hands didn't shake. I had practiced this moment for days, every gesture rehearsed, every detail intentional. "Here," I said gently. "You both can look it over. It's only a housekeeping clause." Sabrina leaned forward, her perfume sharp under the still air. She scanned the first page quickly, her manicured finger tracing each line until she found the signature block. "Everything seems in order," she said. I nodded, pretending to trust her judgment. "Good. Let's make it official." The faintest click echoed through the room, the hidden camera in the picture frame activating. A tiny red dot blinked once behind the glass of reflections number 9. Evan picked up the pen. His hand trembled as he positioned it over the page. I watched the vein in his wrist tighten with hesitation. "Are you sure, Sabrina?" he whispered. "Sign it," she said smoothly. "Mom's just updating the terms. Don't overthink." He hesitated, then pressed the nib down. The pen left a small blot of ink that spread into the paper like a pulse. She followed, signing her name with a slow flourish. Too slow, too deliberate. The ink shimmered under the light, a perfect replica of her greed. They signed their truth with ink, I thought, feeling my breath steady. At 4:50, the camera blinked again, shifting focus. Its microlens caught everything, the faint whisper, the exchanged glances, the way Sabrina's lips moved when she whispered to Evan, "Skip clause 5A. It's redundant." He obeyed. The pen hovered over the paragraph, then slid straight to the signature line. Clause 5A. Prohibition of asset reassignment without written consent of the primary trustee. The red light on the frame blinked twice. Evidence captured. A soft chime sounded from my phone in the next room, the automatic upload. Julian's encrypted cloud had received the footage, along with the signed scans from the synced printer feed. The faint sound of paper sliding out of the tray broke the tension. Evan exhaled. "That's it?" "That's it," I said. "You've both made things very clear." Sabrina smiled, a polished victory gleaming in her eyes. "I knew you'd see reason, Maggie." "Reason?" I echoed quietly. "Yes, I see it perfectly." The tea had gone cold, untouched. Outside, the lake shimmered like steel under the late sun. A gust of wind rippled through the curtains, and the picture frame swayed slightly, its hidden eye never blinking. Evan pushed back his chair. "We'll head out, Mom. You should rest." "I will," I said. "There's peace in paperwork." Sabrina adjusted her coat, glancing once at the signed document. "We'll handle the next steps tomorrow. Thank you for understanding." Her voice carried that false sweetness again, the kind that stains after it fades. When the door closed behind them, the silence filled the villa like a living thing. I picked up the document, held it under the light, and looked at the overlapping ink, theirs over mine, falsity over patience. "Ink doesn't lie," I whispered. The upload notification pinged once more, final and bright. I slipped the paper into a folder marked Verification, Copy 2, locked it in the drawer, and exhaled. The lake outside caught the last trace of sunlight, scattering it across the window pane. It looked almost like applause, soft and silent. The lake was glass that night. Not a ripple moved, not even from the wind. I had left the lamp on low, a pool of amber light spilling over the quilt. The rest of the villa slept in silence, the kind of silence that listens. Then at 2:47 a.m., the phone rang. It didn't ring sharply. It hummed, slow and deliberate, like someone enjoying the sound of their own intrusion. I looked at the caller ID, Sabrina Lake. I let it ring once, twice, then lifted the receiver. Her voice came thin, metallic, slightly warped by distance. "You're awake," she said. "Good. You'll sleep better when this house isn't yours." I stared at the window, at the lake's reflection trembling faintly under the moon. My voice was calm, steady. "I already sleep beside peace, dear." There was a pause, a sharp inhale on her end, then a low laugh. "Peace won't keep you warm when the locks change." "Locks can be replaced," I said softly. "Conscience can't." The sound that followed wasn't laughter anymore. It was static, nervous breathing dressed as confidence. "You think you can outsmart me? Evan already signed the revision. By tomorrow, this property is ours. You should rest," I told her. "It's late. Even lies get tired." She tried again, her voice rising just enough to slip past politeness. "You have no idea who you're fighting, Maggie." But I did. I had known from the first forged smile. "Good night, Sabrina," I said. The line clicked off at 2:50 a.m. The echo of her voice hung in the air for a moment, then dissolved into the hum of the lake outside. The night returned to silence, but it wasn't empty. It was full of proof. On my desk, a faint blue light blinked twice. The system Clara had installed 3 nights earlier, the auto-recording line linked to her secure feed, had activated at 2:46 a.m., 1 minute before the call connected. Every word, every pause, every breath was captured. The recorder's small indicator glowed once more, then went dark. The transfer bar filled slowly across the small monitor beside the bed. At 2:52, the file uploaded directly to the Savannah Division's encrypted server. Label, Case 27B, Verbal Coercion. I sat up, listening to the sound of my own heartbeat steady against the still air. Outside, moonlight brushed across the surface of the lake, cutting a silver path all the way to the dock. The reflection of the lamp glimmered beside it. 2 lights. One from the world, one from within. I reached for my notebook on the nightstand and wrote down a single line. 2:47. She called. She threatened. She confessed. My handwriting stayed smooth. No tremor, no anger. Just record and reason. The old clock on the wall ticked in slow rhythm. Each second sounded like affirmation. I poured a glass of water, watched it catch the lamplight, and whispered to myself, "Peace sounds louder at night." The phone stayed still. The air returned to its waiting calm. I thought of Clara, awake in her office, seeing the incoming file light up her monitor, knowing exactly what it meant. Verbal coercion, documented and time-stamped. I lay back, eyes open toward the ceiling. The reflection from the lake shimmered faintly across the plaster, rippling like breath. Somewhere, a loon called, long, distant, the kind of sound that reminds you the world keeps turning, no matter who threatens you. I smiled once, small but certain. "Threats," I murmured, "are just confessions wearing masks." The wind changed direction, brushing against the window. The curtains swayed, and a sliver of moonlight slid across the floor, stopping at the edge of my bed like a silent witness. I turned off the lamp. The villa exhaled. Morning rain swept over the city, tracing faint rivers across the glass walls of Julian Pierce's office. The air smelled of paper, coffee, and ink, the scent of things being decided. I stood by the window for a moment, watching droplets slide down the pane and merge into one slow current. It looked like proof, small fragments joining until truth had weight. At 9:15 a.m., Julian arrived from the adjoining corridor, tie loosened, glasses fogged slightly from the damp. Behind him, Detective Clara Monroe carried a silver briefcase. She placed it on the table, unclasped the locks, and arranged 3 items with the precision of a ritual: a USB drive, a stack of files, and a bank receipt folded neatly in half. Julian motioned for us to sit. "Everything we have," he said, tapping the table, "is now consolidated: audio, video, and financial logs." I nodded, eyes on the USB. The call was transferred? Clara opened her laptop. The blue screen came alive, a faint hum under the sound of rain. She pressed play. A waveform appeared, sharp peaks, a heartbeat made of sound. My voice. Then Sabrina's, distorted but unmistakable. "You'll sleep better when this house isn't yours." Julian adjusted his glasses, listening. 2:47 a.m., Clara confirmed. Duration, 53 seconds, verified automatic recording, uploaded through Savannah server. He leaned back, folding his hands. "Intent is clear. Coercion confirmed. But we still need one more layer, an independent witness." I looked down at the polished table. The window behind us mirrored the storm outside. "Sometimes truth needs a witness to breathe," I said quietly. Julian studied me. His tone softened. You're thinking of Evan. I'm thinking of conscience, I replied. And he still has one. Clara scrolled through her files, opening a folder titled Hartfield Evidence, Consolidated. She outlined the progress. Fraud under false representation. Intent to defraud via falsified documents. Verbal coercion recorded. Financial manipulation logged. Her voice was calm, exact. We can file now, she said. But if Evan testifies, we close every door they could open. Julian turned to me. He's the hinge, Maggie. Without him, the case stands, but it doesn't lock. I opened my notebook and wrote slowly across the top line, Evan Il's conscience. The ink bled slightly into the paper, soft but permanent. The clock ticked 9:40. The room's quiet rhythm was broken only by Clara's typing, the soft clatter of keys echoing against glass. The reflection of the rain streaked down the wall like moving ink. Julian stood, pacing once. Let's verify the documents again. He reached for the folder marked Property Revision. Every fake leaves fingerprints, he murmured. Fonts, spacing, metadata, it's all there. Clara glanced up. Julian, look at the header font ID. He adjusted his glasses, narrowing his eyes at the screen. Lawson and Brigg? She nodded. Same code, same template ID. He exhaled sharply. That firm was shut down 3 years ago for document forgery. The room seemed to tighten around that sentence. The rain tapped harder against the glass, as if applauding the discovery. So, I said softly, she used a ghost firm. Julian nodded. Exactly. She copied an old Lawson and Brigg form, changed the date, and passed it as our office's revision. That ties intent directly to her. I leaned back, feeling the steady pulse of victory just under my ribs. Then everything she touched is contaminated. Legally, Julian said. Yes. The rainlight flickered across the metal pen lying on the table, splitting into silver fragments. Clara closed the laptop and slid the USB into a labeled envelope. Primary Evidence, Version 1. She handed it to Julian. Once Evan steps forward, we file under Section 16, Georgia Code, Fraudulent Misrepresentation. He looked at me again. Can he handle it? I met his gaze. He'll have to. The truth doesn't survive behind silence forever. The sound of the rain softened, fading into a slow rhythm. I closed my notebook, the word conscience still wet on the page. Julian's voice came quieter, reflective. Justice, he said, is timing married to patience. I nodded, standing. Then let's make the marriage official. Outside, the clouds thinned, and a pale reflection of the lake appeared on the glass, distant but present, like a memory of calm waiting beyond the storm. Truth doesn't shout, I murmured, gathering my coat. It accumulates. At 9:50, the meeting ended. Clara sealed the envelope. Julian set it in his briefcase. I looked once more at the window, the rain easing into light. The envelope came mid-afternoon, thin but deliberate, hand-delivered, the kind of gesture meant to look polite while carrying hidden intent. My name was written in Sabrina's looping script, too elegant for sincerity. Inside, a card pressed with gold lettering, Dinner, Lakefield Villa, 7:00 p.m. No apology, no reason. Just time, place, performance. I held the card beneath the light from the studio window. The lake shimmered beyond the glass, ripples of silver against the darkening sky. The reflection of the word dinner trembled slightly, as though even the ink hesitated to believe it. At 6:00, I called Julian. His voice came through, steady, aware. She wants dinner, I said. Then she'll get dessert, with evidence. He didn't laugh. We'll keep Clara nearby, record everything, wear the mic. I will. When the call ended, I opened the small velvet box on my desk. Inside lay a teardrop-shaped pendant, silver, smooth, almost delicate. Clara had given it to me the night before. Press the clasp twice, she'd said. It activates. Third press saves the file. At 6:15, I slipped it around my neck. The clasp clicked once, soft as a breath. The sound barely rose above the whisper of the wind moving through the open window. I looked into the mirror above the dresser. The reflection of the lake lay behind me, pale and glassy, framing my face with light. My hair caught a faint silver glow from the setting sun. "They forget I used to teach observation," I murmured, smoothing the collar of my blouse. Every gesture tonight mattered. The angle of my gaze, the tone of my pause, the way silence could make them speak faster than I ever could. By 6:30, Clara's unmarked car was parked halfway down the hill near the shore, concealed behind the magnolias. She checked in once by text. "Line live, Channel 2. I left the villa 15 minutes later. The air smelled of wet pine and electricity, the kind of scent that comes before rain. Each step down the gravel path carried the memory of everything that had already been taken, and everything I had quietly taken back. At 6:45, I reached the drive. The house glowed warm from the inside, every window lit like a stage. Candles flickered along the long dining table, visible through the front room. It looked perfect. It looked rehearsed. Sabrina stood by the doorway, dressed in white again, her smile brittle and bright. Evan was beside her, nervous, half a step behind. "Mother," she said too sweetly, "I thought we could start over. A family dinner." I returned the smile, small and contained. "Of course." The chandelier above the table dripped light across the crystal glasses. The scent of jasmine and roasted herbs floated through the air, too fragrant, almost theatrical. I felt the pendant's weight against my skin, its steady pulse humming like a heartbeat. Sabrina gestured toward the seat across from her. "Please, sit. I had this set up for peace." "Peace," I repeated, lowering myself into the chair. Such a complicated word. The silverware chimed softly as I unfolded the napkin. The candles reflected in the polished surface of the table, 20 tiny flames trembling in unison. Outside, the wind skimmed the lake, scattering small waves of light that danced against the window pane. The entire room shimmered in reflection, faces, glasses, lies. Evan poured wine, his hands unsteady. "To new beginnings," he said, voice low. Sabrina raised her glass, her ring catching the candlelight. "And to family unity." I lifted mine just high enough for the mic to catch her tone. "Even reconciliation," I said gently, "can be staged." For a second, the only sound was the faint hiss of the candles. Sabrina's smile tightened. "You always see too much, Maggie." "Observation," I said, "is a habit, hard to unlearn." The pendant's tiny light blinked once beneath my collar, active, recording, patient. At 7 o'clock, the performance began. I was no longer a guest. I was the audience, the camera, the witness. The candles burned low, their flames bending in the faint draft from the window. Every sound carried weight, the clink of silverware, the soft exhale between words. The air inside the villa was heavy, layered with perfume and unspoken tension. Outside, the lake mirrored the dining room's golden light, as if the water itself wanted to witness what was about to happen. At 7:10 p.m., the meal had turned into theater. Sabrina's laughter drifted across the table, brittle, rehearsed. Evan sat quiet beside her, his fork motionless. I stirred my tea once, letting the spoon ring softly against porcelain. The pendant at my neck pulsed faintly with its hidden life. Sabrina raised her glass. "To family peace," she said, voice wrapped in honey. Evan didn't move. The silence between them was its own toast. I set my glass down carefully, the sound sharp against the linen. "Peace is earned," I said. "Not signed." Her eyes narrowed, but the smile stayed fixed. "Oh, come now. We all want the same thing, stability." "Stability shouldn't need forgery," I replied. For a moment, only the soft hiss of the candles answered. Then Sabrina leaned closer, voice lowering to a whisper meant for control, not confidence. "Once she signs, we're clear." Evan looked up. "She won't." "She will," Sabrina snapped, her patience thinning, "or she'll end up where old people belong." The air thickened. Even the lake outside seemed to still. Each word was caught clean by the mic's delicate ear, the waveform recording her certainty, her cruelty, her proof. I said nothing. I let silence stretch just long enough to turn comfortable confidence into exposed arrogance. The pendant blinked once beneath my collar, marking the timestamp. "In their voices," my mind whispered. I heard their verdict. Evan's hands tightened around his napkin. "Sabrina, stop," he said under his breath. "Why?" she hissed. "She's already lost. The documents are signed. The bank approved everything." "They didn't," I said quietly. Her head jerked toward me, eyes bright with confusion. "What?" "The bank didn't approve anything. The forms you forged are under review by law enforcement." She blinked, smile faltering for the first time. "You're bluffing." "I don't bluff," I said. "I document." The room went still again. Only the faint ripple of the lake touched the silence. Evan looked at me, realization dawning slow and painful. His lips parted as though to speak, but no words came. At 7:25, far away by the waterline, Clara's receiver blinked green. Signal confirmed. She had everything. The chandelier trembled slightly from a shift in the wind, scattering light across the table. Every reflection glinted sharper, off glass, off silver, off the surface of the wine Sabrina no longer dared to touch. "You planned this," she said finally, her tone a half laugh, half accusation. I met her gaze. "No, you did." She rose from her chair, but the movement was too late. Clara's signal lighted red, transmission complete. I stood, smoothing the fabric of my sleeve, my voice even. "Dinner's over." The words carried no anger, only gravity, the kind that closes doors. Outside, a gust swept over the lake, extinguishing one candle through the open window. Smoke curled upward, twisting like a silent signature on the air. Evan looked at Sabrina, then at me. "What have you done?" he whispered. "What was already necessary," I said. The final candle flickered, casting the room into soft shadow. Somewhere beyond the trees, the faint hum of Clara's engine stirred, heading back toward the main road. The night returned quiet, heavy with the residue of truth. The candles from dinner had long burned out, but their faint scent lingered through the hallway. I sat in the studio, the only light coming from the small lamp that bent its glow over the unfinished canvas. The brush marks still glistened, wet under the pale yellow beam. At 11 p.m., as I heard footsteps outside, the cautious rhythm of someone uncertain whether they were welcome, the door opened without a knock. Evan stood there, framed by the rectangle of hallway light, his face drawn and older than the hours could explain. His reflection trembled across the half-dried paint behind him. He didn't speak at first. His eyes roamed the room, the sketches, the lake shimmering beyond the window. Finally, his voice came out low, scraped raw. "Mom, I need to tell you everything." I didn't turn. "Then start with when." He swallowed hard. "When she told me you'd die soon," he said, each word breaking on the edge of breath. "She said you wanted the villa handled before it was too late." I believed her. "When did you forget who you were?" I asked. His silence answered before his voice could. "I thought I was saving us," he whispered. "But I was just helping her destroy you." The brush slipped from my fingers and landed softly on the wooden floor. The sound made him flinch. The lamp's light carved a line down his face, dividing shadow from guilt. "You signed the papers," I said. He nodded. "Yes, I signed what she wrote. I saw the forgery but didn't stop her. I kept thinking maybe it would fix itself." "Nothing ever fixes itself," I said. "Someone always decides to repair it." He stepped closer, eyes damp. "I saw the recording tonight. I heard what she said. I can't pretend anymore." "Then don't," I said. voice quiet but firm. He drew a folded sheet from his pocket, creased, smudged, edges worn. "It's the draft transfer she sent me. I checked the metadata. It shows her edits. She added my signature from a scanned file." The paper shook slightly in his hand. I took it, feeling the faint warmth of guilt still on it. Under the lamplight, her changes were visible. Font mismatched, date altered, a digital scar where she'd pasted his name. At 11:10, he sat on the stool beside the easel. The sound of the lake seeped through the window, a steady rhythm like breathing. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. When I finally did, my voice was softer. "You can still make it right." He looked at me, exhausted. "How?" "By standing beside truth. Clara will call. Tell her you're ready." He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll do it." The phone on the desk buzzed a few minutes later. Clara's voice, calm and steady, filled the small room. "Mrs. Lake, is he there?" I passed the receiver. "I'm here," Evan said. "I'll testify. Everything I know, everything I signed." There was a pause on the line, the kind that meant something had shifted. "That's enough," Clara said. "You've just changed everything." When the call ended, the studio felt different. Lighter, though the air was still dense with paint and memory. Evan exhaled, long and shaking. I placed a hand on his shoulder. The weight of it steadied both of us. "Then let's let truth live instead," I said. He nodded, eyes glinting under the lamplight. "Forgiveness," I murmured, "is not freedom. It's permission to do right." He leaned forward, elbows on knees, silent tears tracing his jawline. The lamp flickered once, and the painting caught its reflection, a horizon forming where there had been only chaos. At 11:30, I picked up the fallen brush and drew a single silver line across the canvas, connecting the fractured light to the calm water below. The sound was almost a sigh. Outside, the wind moved across the lake, stirring faint ripples of moonlight. It sounded like breathing, steady, alive, forgiving. "Truth breathes tonight," I whispered. Morning came pale and silver, the kind of light that slips across glass without sound. The lake outside was perfectly still, holding its breath beneath a thin veil of mist. Inside the studio, the air smelled faintly of ink and jasmine tea. The desk had turned into an altar of proof: USB drives, paper folders, stamped receipts, and one small recorder laid neatly in a row. At 7:20 a.m., Clara leaned over the table, gloves on, eyes sharp with focus. Each document had been numbered, labeled, and logged. The chain of custody tag gleamed red against the pale wood. She wrote in block letters across the final label: "Case file, Lakefield Villa fraud." Then she peeled back the adhesive strip, pressed it firm, and signed beneath the seal. The sound of the sticker tearing free from its backing filled the room, small and decisive. I stood beside her, holding my teacup in both hands. Steam rose and caught the light, curling like breath on cold glass. "Chain of custody initiated," Clara said, reading the words aloud as she pressed her initials next to mine. Her voice was calm, procedural, the rhythm of justice spoken fluently. I nodded. "That's it then." "For now," she replied. "Julian's filing the affidavit this hour. Once the judge signs, it's official." She glanced toward the window, where the morning light spilled across the floorboards in thin ribbons. The reflection of the lake shimmered against the walls, painting everything in a faint, metallic glow. It looked almost holy. She gathered the evidence bag into a black case, closed the latches with 2 firm clicks, and carried it toward the door. The wheels of her briefcase hummed softly across the wooden floor. Before leaving, she paused. "You did everything right, Mrs. Lake." "I did what had to be done," I said. She gave a short nod, then disappeared into the brightness beyond the porch. The faint rumble of her car faded down the road. Silence filled the villa again. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, only complete. I sat at the table and opened the tea canister. The aroma rose warm and sharp, cutting through the morning chill. The kettle began its slow sigh, the first bubbles whispering up like distant rain. I poured a cup and placed it on the saucer with care. The porcelain clicked once, a sound as steady as a heartbeat. Outside, the fog had begun to lift, revealing the smooth silver sheet of the lake. The phone buzzed once on the table. A message from Julian. Judge signed, arrest at dawn. I read it twice, then set the phone face down. The house was silent, except for the low hum of the lake outside. Moonlight spilled across the studio floor, tracing silver lines between stacks of paper. The phone rang once, sharp, cutting through the stillness. I didn't move at first. It rang again. When I lifted the receiver, her voice came through smooth, shaking at the edges. Maggie, I just want to talk. Alone, at the dock. Her tone was syrup over broken glass, the kind she used when she thought charm could fix what lies had already ruined. I looked toward the window. The lake shimmered beneath the moon, wide and cold, every ripple like a breath held too long. Tomorrow, I said evenly, the lake will see everything. A pause stretched between us, brittle and uncertain, then a faint exhale, anger disguised as calm. You don't have to do this. I already did, I said, and hung up. For a long moment, I stood there, letting the silence hum. Then I turned to the printer on the far desk, its surface dusted with pale moonlight. I inserted a blank page and opened the file Clara had left. One copy marked mock file, diversion use only. The machine started its slow rhythm, spitting out the pages line by line. The sound filled the room like a quiet heartbeat. When the final sheet slid out, I tapped the stack into order, aligning the edges with care. The reflection of the moon fell directly across the papers, bleaching the ink to a faint blue. Outside, a single wave broke against the dock, small but deliberate. Predators, I whispered. Always think dawn hides them. I placed the decoy file into a manila folder and sealed it with a strip of tape. The edges crinkled softly under my fingers. Dawn came red. The first streak of light spilled over the lake, painting the water in thin layers of rose and silver. Mist curled above the dock, shifting with each breath of wind. The world was silent except for the faint creak of wood beneath slow steps. Sabrina appeared at the end of the path, hair tangled, breath quick. Her heels clattered against the planks as she moved closer, eyes sharp, mouth drawn tight. "Where is it?" she demanded, her voice cracking through the morning calm. The police car doors closed with a muted thud, followed by the crunch of tires over gravel. Dawn light spilled slowly over the lake, soft and pale, brushing the villa in silver. I stood by the porch, watching as the flashing lights faded down the hill until they were swallowed by the trees. As we walked back toward the door, Evan paused. Near the entryway, half hidden behind the old cedar chest, he found a sealed envelope marked in my late husband's handwriting. His voice caught. Dad's. The safe clicked open with a soft metallic sigh. Inside, beneath the stack of tax ledgers and paint sketches, lay a single envelope, its edges browned by time, the wax seal still unbroken. The handwriting across the front was unmistakable. For Margaret, when the house needs light again. My fingers trembled slightly as I lifted it. The paper smelled faintly of cedar and turpentine, the scent of his workshop by the old garage. I unfolded the pages carefully, each crease a line of memory. Evening stretched wide over Lakefield, the sky melting into shades of amber and blue. I sat on the porch with a teapot beside me, steam rising in slow ribbons. The lake moved gently, its surface rippling with the last touch of wind. On the small table lay 3 things: the USB drive, Rowan's letter, and the finished painting, reflection number 7. The brushstrokes gleamed under the fading light, half gold, half shadow. I poured tea into my cup, the sound soft and steady. The scent mingled with pine from the woods behind the villa. Across the water, a bird cut through the quiet, its wings flashing once before disappearing into the light. I lifted the letter again, tracing his name with my fingertip. "You were right," I whispered. "Silence was my weapon." The lake answered with a ripple, sunlight scattering across its skin like fragments of memory. I looked at the painting one last time, the water, the dock, the line of dawn that divided dark from light. Justice, I said, isn't revenge. It's memory written properly. The wind caught my hair, carrying the words away across the surface of the lake. The camera of the world, if there was one, would have seen nothing dramatic, just a woman, a teacup, and the calm after a storm. The piano from the neighbor's cottage began to play softly, notes drifting over the water. I closed my eyes, breathing in rhythm with the sound. The screen of the moment faded to brightness, the kind that doesn't blind, only cleanses, and for the first time since everything began, peace didn't feel like silence anymore. It felt like continuation.